This is the Buffett Mindset channel where we practice patience and calm wealth building daily. If you enjoy these types of videos, consider liking and subscribing. This will mean a lot to the channel. Repeat after me. I am wealth. I am peace. I am power. For as I think, so I become. You were designed to be the master of that final hour, not its victim. For the man who lays down with fear in his chest wakes chained the next morning, and the man who lays down with purpose on his lips wakes freer than he was the day before. This is no superstition. It is law, eternal as sunrise, exact as gravity. The subconscious mind does not sleep when the body rests. It listens, it absorbs, it repeats, and like the fertile soil of a vast field, it does not judge the seed you drop into it. Sow weeds of worry, and weeds you shall reap. Sow doubt, and doubt will multiply. But sow faith, sow decision, sow certainty, and the soil will return to you harvests beyond imagination. This is why the evil 0.1%, the builders of dynasties, the shapers of nations, the men whose barns never run dry, guard the hour before sleep like a fortress. They do not drift into it with idle chatter or glowing screens. They enter it as a king enters his court, with intention, with solemnity, with law on his lips. Carnegie whispered to himself visions of steel long before the world bent to his empire. Edison filled his mind with light in the darkness of thousands of failed experiments, rehearsing not his defeat, but his inevitable victory. Rockefeller closed his days with order, imagining streams of oil and rivers of wealth flowing under his control. Buffett, though quieter in habit, has done the same all his life, repeating principles of patience and value until they engrave themselves deeper than any storm could reach. And the cowboy by the fire, though he may never build a corporation, obeys the same law when he ends his day, not with complaint, but with gratitude, not with fear of wolves, but with the steady vision of tomorrow ride. The law is the same for all. What you whisper before sleep, you will live when you rise. Yet most men waste this sacred hour. They lie in bed rehearsing their failures, reimagining insults, counting debts, fearing the dawn, and so dawn brings them exactly what they rehearsed: more debt, more insult, more failure. They cannot see that they are the ones programming their own chains, but you must see it now. You must take this hour back. You must close each day not as a beggar, but as a sovereign, speaking aloud the sentence that aligns you with law. Speak it with faith, speak it with decision, speak it until your bones believe it. For the subconscious does not resist a master who speaks with conviction. It yields, it obeys, it multiplies. And if you repeat the right words nightly, if you guard this final gate, then you will find your mornings transformed, your days clarified, your barns filled, not because chance smiled upon you, but because you obeyed the law that governs wealth, peace, and destiny. The sentence before sleep works like compound interest, invisible at first, undeniable in time, for it reshapes not only your mornings but your entire life. Most men underestimate this because they measure power by suddenness, by flashes of lightning, by bursts of fortune. But law does not bend for bursts, it bends for rhythm, and rhythm is built when a man plants the same seed daily until the field cannot help but bloom. That final whispered sentence, repeated with faith, becomes the most consistent seed you sow. It seeps into your subconscious like water into thirsty ground, unnoticed in the moment, yet over weeks, over months, over years, the harvest becomes impossible to deny. Your posture shifts, your speech changes, your decisions align with what you rehearsed in silence. Others call it luck, coincidence, breakthrough, but it is nothing more than law honoring the man who honored rhythm. Buffett has lived this principle all his life. His compound fortune is not the product of dazzling leaps, but of steady sowing, year after year, decade after decade. He spoke patience when others shouted panic. He rehearsed order when others rehearsed chaos, and time itself bent to reward his belief. Solomon knew the same truth when he wrote that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. What you speak before sleep becomes fruit, and you shall eat of it, sour if you sowed worry, sweet if you sowed faith. The cowboy knows it too. He does not close his day rehearsing every mile of hardship, every ache in his back, every storm cloud on the horizon. He leans against the saddle by the fire and whispers thanks for the herd still safe, for the trail still open, for the dawn that will rise no matter how black the sky. That gratitude, spoken nightly, multiplies into strength that carries him through storms. Meanwhile, the greenhorn, muttering complaint before sleep, wakes weaker, angrier, more beaten before the day even begins. This is the difference between those who bend the world and those bent by it. Not wealth, not education, not circumstance, but discipline in that final hour. And here is the sharper truth. Once you begin this rhythm, your life cannot remain the same. For the subconscious is loyal beyond measure. It cannot resist repeated command. It will bend your habits, your decisions, your very identity to match what you gave it. And once identity shifts, destiny must follow. That is why the sentence you repeat before sleep is more important than the work you grind through by day. Work without belief exhausts. Belief without work daydreams, but belief reinforced nightly, spoken until it hardens, compels you to work with fire, compels you to endure with strength, compels you to reap without apology. And so your barns fill not by magic but by law. That one sentence becomes the rudder of your life, steering silently while you rest, guiding you through storms, bending the world around you until you look back one day and realize that the man who whispered in the dark has become the sovereign who commands in the light. The nightly sentence must be simple enough to carve itself into your bones, yet weighty enough to command the subconscious like a rider commands his horse. It is not poetry, not wishful thinking, not a vague hope whispered into the dark. It is law, condensed into words, repeated until they become the very fabric of your being. The sentence is this: I am wealth, I am peace, I am power, for as I think, so I become. Speak it slowly, not with hesitation, not with doubt, but with the fire of a man declaring his birthright. Whisper it once, and it is a thought. Whisper it nightly, and it becomes belief. Whisper it with faith, and it becomes identity. Whisper it with persistence, and it becomes destiny. The world has always bent for men who believed in such rhythm. Carnegie spoke sentences of steel long before he owned a furnace. Ford rehearsed the automobile in his mind long before a factory stood. Edison repeated visions of light through 10,000 failures until his subconscious carried him past despair. Buffett has lived decades with the same sentence of patience. Value multiplies, time rewards. And the cowboy in the wilderness, though his barns are smaller, rehearses law the same way when he ends each day, saying, the trail will open, the dawn will rise, the herd will hold, for as I think, so I become. The rhythm is the same whether spoken in a palace or by a campfire. The law has no favorites, it rewards belief. But here is where most men fail. They speak the sentence once or twice, then abandon it when the harvest does not appear by morning. They forget that the soil does not obey impatience, it obeys persistence. The seed planted nightly takes root in silence, out of sight. Yet when the roots are deep, the harvest cannot be stopped. So I warn you, do not measure the power of this law by days, measure it by decades. Repeat this sentence for weeks, and your habits will bend. Repeat it for months, and your mind will harden into discipline. Repeat it for years, and your barns will testify to a life transformed. Every great man you admire lived by some version of this nightly command, whether he called it prayer, affirmation, meditation, or discipline. The label matters little. The rhythm matters everything. For the subconscious is loyal, and it cannot resist the man who commands it nightly. So take this sentence, guard it as treasure, repeat it as law. Do not whisper it casually, but declare it as covenant. And when you rise in the morning, act as though it is already true. Soon you will see that the world bends, not because it is merciful, not because it is random, but because you bent first your own thought, and thought is the root of all reality. When the nightly law takes root, mornings no longer begin as they once did, with dread on the tongue and heaviness in the bones, but with fire that feels older than sleep, a clarity that seems to have been woven into the marrow during the night. The man who once dragged himself into the day now rises as if pushed forward by unseen hands, for his subconscious has already done half the labor before dawn. His speech shifts first, almost unnoticed. Hesitation gives way to certainty. Complaint is replaced with command. Instead of saying, I hope today goes well, he says, today bends to me. Instead of confessing lack, he declares provision. This change of speech reshapes his decisions. He no longer chooses like a beggar weighing scraps, but like a sovereign stewarding barns. He no longer asks whether he is worthy of opportunity, but whether the opportunity is worthy of him. His habits align to this new rhythm. He begins his work not with scattered energy, but with focus born of conviction. Even in storms, even when results seem delayed, he presses on with calm, for the law whispered nightly has hardened into identity. This identity soon bleeds into posture. You can see it in the way he walks into a room, no longer shrinking, no longer apologizing for his presence, but moving with the quiet weight of a man who knows his thought commands reality. Others sense it and cannot name it, but they respect it, they listen, they follow. His authority grows not from effort, but from alignment. This transformation multiplies daily, for each night he repeats the sentence, and each morning he wakes further engraved by it. In time he looks back and scarcely recognizes the man he once was, a drifter carried by fear, a beggar pleading for scraps, a doubter rehearsing chains before sleep. Now he is sovereign, now he is builder, now he is commander. His barns begin to swell, not because he suddenly found luck, but because the subconscious, trained by nightly law, bends every decision, every encounter, every habit into harvest. Buffett himself has lived decades in such rhythm, proof that one thought compounded daily outweighs all bursts of effort. Solomon declared it long ago, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And the cowboy proves it still, rising before dawn, calm and steady, his nightly gratitude carrying him through storm and dust alike. This is the fruit of the nightly sentence: mornings remade, speech reshaped, decisions aligned, identity transformed. And once identity changes, destiny must follow, for no man can rise above the law of his own thought, and no world can resist the authority of a man who believes with decision and repeats with persistence. Identity forged by nightly repetition does not stop at the edge of one man's skin, for identity is contagious, and the rhythm of his belief multiplies outward into family, community, and generations unborn. The man who once carried fear like a burden infecting his household now carries certainty like a torch that lights every face around the fire. His wife feels it first, for the quiet tension that once haunted the home is gone, replaced by steadiness she can lean upon. His children feel it next, for the words they hear at the table are no longer heavy with doubt, but firm with possibility, training their young minds to believe before the world has a chance to teach them fear. His neighbors notice it too, for a man who speaks with calm conviction steadies others who still drift, and in time his counsel becomes sought after, his example imitated. A community shifts when even one man repeats the law until it becomes flesh, for his barns do not fill only with grain, but with wisdom, courage, and peace that overflow into every soul that draws near. Solomon and wisdom spread this way, not by force but by overflow, until nations traveled to sit at his feet. Buffett discipline has bent markets themselves, not because he asked to be followed, but because the rhythm of his patience proved itself and others aligned to it. The cowboy on the open range shows it in quieter ways, for when storms strike and herds scatter, his steadiness becomes the anchor of every greenhorn who would have fled. Generations carry such patterns forward. Children raised under the roof of fear learn to shrink, hesitate, apologize. Children raised under the roof of nightly law learn to rise, declare, build. Legacy is not the gold you leave, but the rhythm you imprint, and nightly repetition is the chisel that carves it deep into the stone of time. Most men miss this, thinking their weakness is private, their doubt their own. But law wastes nothing, and their children inherit the very patterns they rehearsed before sleep. This is why you cannot drift through that final hour. It is not only your destiny at stake, but theirs. Repeat the law nightly, and you will plant orchards your grandchildren will harvest. Neglect it, and you will sow weeds they will spend years pulling. The choice is yours, but the consequence is generational. The man who guards his final hour becomes the builder of dynasties, not by title, not by wealth alone, but by rhythm that outlives his bones. For the law does not end with you, it multiplies into the marrow of those who come after. And when your fire is ash and your trail long behind you, the world will still walk in the rhythm you spoke nightly into your soul. Generational ripple folds back into eternal law, for what a man repeats in silence each night is not mere self-help, not casual habit, but alignment with the very structure of creation itself. Thought is not private, it is seed, and every seed answers to law. When you whisper the nightly sentence with conviction, you are not simply calming your mind, you are commanding the order that shapes worlds. Solomon declared, "By wisdom the Lord founded the earth, by understanding he established the heavens." Creation itself was built by word, and so it remains. Every harvest that ever filled a barn, every empire that ever rose from dust, every invention that ever bent the future came first as a sentence repeated in thought until it became substance. Edison whispered of light until the dark yielded. Ford rehearsed engines until the horse was replaced. Carnegie filled his nights with visions of steel until cities bowed to it. Buffett's quiet creed of patience and compounding is no different. Spoken inwardly, rehearsed endlessly, until the world itself bent around his rhythm. Even the cowboy, alone under a star-pinned sky, lives by this eternal pattern. He whispers of dawn when night is thickest, of strength when his bones ache, of safe herds when wolves howl, and by morning he rises into the very reality he rehearsed. This is no accident, no superstition. It is structure, it is law. Yet most men remain blind to it. They think their nightly whispers vanish into nothing, when in truth they are chiseling tomorrow's stone. They think their fear-filled muttering harms no one, when in truth it becomes chains for their children. They think belief is optional, when in truth it is the lever by which destinies turn. And so they drift, poor not only in barns but in spirit, because they refuse to seize the hour when creation listens most closely. But you must not drift, you must not waste the gate of night, for when the conscious guard sleeps, the subconscious listens with open hands, and what you place there becomes law. If you choose fear, fear multiplies. If you choose faith, faith multiplies. If you choose sovereignty, sovereignty multiplies. This is the eternal order, unbroken, unbending, unchanging. And when you align with it, night after night, sentence after sentence, you step into the very rhythm by which God himself ordered the stars. That is why the nightly law cannot fail. It is not new, it is not invention, it is the rediscovery of what has always been. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Practicing the nightly law is not complicated, but it demands reverence, for it is nothing less than sowing into eternity. Think of it like the cowboy ritual at day end. He does not simply collapse in the dirt when the herd quiets. He makes his circuit, he checks the ropes, he mends what frayed, he throws wood on the fire so it burns through the night. These small, steady actions guard his world while he sleeps. In the same way, the man who would command destiny guards his last thoughts before bed. He does not drift into sleep with the noise of the world still echoing in his mind. He does not hand the gate of his soul to idle chatter, glowing screens, or fears rehearsed in silence. He closes the day with intention. He finds a quiet place, even if it is only the corner of a crowded room. He slows his breath. He recalls the sentence, simple and unbroken: I am wealth, I am peace, I am power, for as I think, so I become. He does not mumble it as though uncertain. He speaks it with weight, as a rider lays his hand on the horse's neck and makes it obey. He repeats it until the words are not only sound but sensation, until he feels wealth not as fantasy but as certainty, peace not as hope but as identity, power not as wish but as law. He gives his subconscious no contradiction, no distraction, no weakness to chew on through the night. He plants one seed only, and he plants it deep. Over time, this becomes a ritual as steady as tying the cinch before dawn. It may take a minute, it may take 10, but it will be done, without exception, every night. And just as the cowboy who checks his ropes nightly never wakes to find his herd scattered, the man who repeats the sentence nightly never wakes to find his mind enslaved. He rises freer each dawn, for his subconscious has labored while he rested, shaping thought into identity, identity into action, action into destiny. Most men will scoff at such simplicity. They will say,
It cannot be that one sentence could change my life.
And so they will dismiss it. They will drift. They will reap weeds while mocking the farmer who sowed one seed faithfully. But the sovereign knows better. He has seen that law does not answer to cleverness but to consistency. The world bends not for the brilliant but for the faithful. And he will smile in silence as his barns grow, as his peace deepens, as his children inherit strength, while the scoffers look on in confusion. For law is no respecter of opinion. It answers only to obedience. And obedience to this nightly ritual is the mark of a man who bends the world before he ever lays his head to rest. Kept for years, the nightly ritual does more than remake the man. It reshapes futures, bending paths unseen, echoing long after his fire has gone cold. For repetition in the secret place does not stay secret. It multiplies, first in his own marrow, then in his speech, then in the lives that circle his table, and finally in the generations that carry his name. A man who whispers, I am wealth, I am peace, I am power, night after night will eventually walk with such calm assurance that his children never know the sting of fear their father once carried. His wife will see in his eyes the certainty of a man who no longer drifts, and she will build her own peace upon his steadiness. His neighbors will find themselves steadied by his presence, even if they never hear his nightly sentence. This is the ripple of law. The subconscious of one man, aligned and commanded, can alter the destiny of many. Consider Solomon, who asked for wisdom in the stillness of night and whose kingdom prospered beyond imagination. Consider Buffett, who disciplined his thoughts into patience and order until markets themselves leaned toward his rhythm, and millions unknowingly found security in his steadiness. Consider the cowboy, whose nightly habit of gratitude and resolve carried him through decades of storms. His children inherit not his barns alone, but his posture, his rhythm, his quiet strength. And when those children face storms of their own, they will remember the pattern, and they will repeat it, whether they know its source or not. This is why the nightly ritual cannot be measured only in personal barns filled. It must be measured in legacies secured, for every whispered sentence plants not only in your subconscious, but in the soil of history itself. Fearful men leave fearful legacies, faithful men leave faithful ones. And the sovereign who guards his final hour leaves behind more than words. He leaves an inheritance of thought that multiplies for generations. Most men will never grasp this. They will treat their nightly words as idle, their thoughts as private, their habits as meaningless. But the law wastes nothing. Every word is seed, every thought is blueprint, every ritual is inheritance. And when you have repeated the sentence long enough that it is no longer discipline but instinct, no longer ritual but identity, you will have carved a destiny that outlives you. Your barns will testify, your peace will ripple outward, your family will inherit courage, and your name will carry weight even in the mouths of strangers. For law ensures that nothing whispered with faith in the stillness of night is ever lost. It multiplies silently until one day the world itself bends, not only for you, but for all who follow in your rhythm. The nightly ritual ties back to eternal law, for every whispered word aligns man with the same creative power that spoke stars into being, and the sentence repeated in the stillness of night is but a faint echo of the voice that once said, "Let there be light," and light has not ceased to obey sense. You may think your small words in the dark are nothing, but the structure of creation proves otherwise. For thought fused with emotion and declared aloud becomes substance. It molds matter, it directs circumstance, it engraves identity. This is not philosophy, it is blueprint. The law has never changed, and it never will. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You stand in that same stream of order when you declare your nightly sentence with faith. Solomon knew it when he built a kingdom on wisdom rather than weapons. Buffett knows it when he multiplies barns through patience rather than panic. The cowboy knows it when he ends his day with gratitude rather than despair, aligning himself with dawn even before the sun has risen. Most men drift past this sacred truth, their lips muttering fear, their minds rehearsing chains, and then they curse heaven for not granting them freedom. But heaven has already spoken. The harvest belongs to the seed, and the seed is thought, and the soil is the subconscious, and the law is repetition. Nothing more, nothing less. When you whisper nightly, "I am wealth, I am peace, I am power, for as I think, so I become," you are not inventing a new trick. You are stepping back into eternal order, joining your voice to the same rhythm that governs the tides, the seasons, the stars. You are aligning with what was written before time itself, and the proof will not delay. Your mornings will harden into clarity, your barns into abundance, your family into courage, your legacy into immortality. Not because chance favored you, but because law answered you. And when your trail is long behind you, when your fire has burned to ash, when your bones rest in silence, the words you spoke nightly will still be alive, carried in the subconscious of those who watched you, rippling outward in choices, in destinies, in worlds you never lived to see. For the law wastes nothing, and every whispered word spoken in faith is gathered into eternity, multiplied and returned. That is why the 0.1% guard this hour as holy. That is why you must too. For what you repeat before sleep is not only shaping your tomorrow, it is shaping forever. So here is the final charge, laid plain as firelight against the night. You cannot drift another day. You cannot surrender another hour. You cannot waste another night rehearsing chains when freedom is waiting at the edge of your lips. The sentence is yours. The law is eternal. The hour before sleep is open, but it will not wait forever. Every day you delay, weeds multiply, fears deepen, regrets stacked like uncollected debt. Every night you let slip by unguarded, your subconscious records weakness and carries it into dawn. This is why most men grow old but never rise. They die with barns half built and dreams half lived, because they never seize the one practice that bends destiny. Do not think you will begin someday. Someday is the lie fear whispers to keep you small. Begin tonight. Begin now. Close your eyes not with confusion but with command. Whisper not with hesitation but with certainty. I am wealth. I am peace. I am power. For as I think, so I become. Say it again until the rhythm becomes your heartbeat, until your bones vibrate with its truth. Then sleep and let the law do its work. When you wake, rise as if already new, as if already sovereign, as if the world must obey. Then repeat again tonight and the next, until the pattern is so deep it cannot be uprooted. Think of Buffett holding to patience when markets screamed panic. Think of Solomon drawing wisdom while nations sought his ruin. Think of the cowboy tying his ropes each night though wolves howled and storms threatened. They endured not by accident but by law, and so must you. Do this for weeks and your speech will shift. Do this for months and your posture will harden. Do this for years and your barns will testify to a life transformed. And when your trail is long and your fire burns to embers, you will not look back in regret but in triumph. For you will know you seized the hour most men wasted. You will know you whispered into eternity, and eternity whispered back in harvest. You will know that fear lost its grip, that drift died, that destiny bent to the rhythm of your belief. That is the secret, the trick of the 0.1%, the inheritance of kings and cowboys alike. Command your nights, and your days will kneel. Obey this law, and nothing, not storms, not time, not death itself, can deny you the life you were born to live. But hear me clear, the nightly sentence is not meant to be a trick of words alone. It is a covenant between your spirit and the law, and like every covenant, it demands not only repetition, but reverence. You must approach it as the cowboy approaches his horse at dawn, with respect, with steadiness, with understanding that this beast has power enough to carry him across deserts or throw him into dust. Your subconscious is that beast, mighty and loyal once trained, wild and ruinous if neglected. Each night you either saddle it with law or leave it to wander free, and in the morning you will ride whichever you prepared. That is why the men who bend the world guard this hour like treasure. They do not hand their reins to fear. They do not feed their horse with scraps of doubt. They do not wander into bed careless of what their mind chews upon in silence. They feed it certainty. They give it command. They bridle it with law. And when they wake, it carries them forward without resistance. This is the difference between the drifter and the sovereign. The drifter lets his horse buck, run wild, scatter seed, and trample fields, then curses the trail for being harsh. The sovereign trains his mount nightly, whispers the same words until the beast bends its neck, and then he rides destiny itself as though it were a steed under his command. This is not metaphor alone, it is structure. Solomon's words prove it. The soul of the diligent shall be made fat. Diligence is nothing more than daily discipline, small repeated acts that compound into sovereignty. Buffett Barnes prove it. Billions multiplied not by bursts of brilliance, but by daily obedience to patience and value, rehearsed inwardly until it became unshakable instinct. And the cowboy proves it too, his herd intact, his fences strong, his reputation steady, all born of nightly rituals others would call small. Yet in these small acts, worlds are shaped. That is the law, and now it rests on you. Tonight, when the fire dies and the room falls silent, you will stand at the same gate they once stood. Will you let fear write your program, or will you write it yourself? Will you whisper doubt, or will you whisper law? Will you drift into sleep as a beggar, or will you command the final hour as a sovereign? Do not think the choice is small. It is the hinge of destiny. Every empire that ever stood, every fortune that ever endured, every peace that ever crowned a man was built on this hinge. Choose well, repeat faithfully, ride boldly. For as you think in your heart, so shall you be. And as you whisper nightly, so shall the world bend at dawn. And now we ride further down this trail into the marrow of the truth that too many men avoid, because it demands endurance, because it strips away every excuse and leaves you face to face with the law that governs your destiny, whether you obey it or not. You see, the nightly ritual is not some spell to charm fortune. It is the furnace where identity is forged. And once a man has hammered his thought into shape, he cannot escape the edge it cuts into his life. Identity governs action. Action governs habit. Habit governs legacy. And legacy governs eternity. The coward tries to change results without changing identity, tinkering at the edges of harvest while ignoring the seed. He joins programs. He buys books. He makes resolutions that last less than a season, all because he will not kneel at the anvil where thought must be beaten into law. But the sovereign knows better. He does not scatter his effort chasing 1,000 fires. He bends daily at the same flame, repeating the same words until they carve grooves deeper than fear, until his subconscious moves with the rhythm of his command, without protest, without delay. That is why he bends the world while others are bent by it. Solomon spoke of this when he said, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Buffett embodies it when he repeats patience in the face of panic, compounding in the face of chaos. The cowboy lives it too, each night checking his ropes, each dawn saddling his horse, never missing the rhythm though storms rage and wolves circle, because he knows that once rhythm is broken, the herd is lost. Most men do not fall because they lack talent, but because they lack rhythm. They skip a night, then a week, then a season, until their identity cracks, and when storms come, they are exposed. They wonder why fear returns, why doubt multiplies, why barns stay empty. It is because they stopped speaking law when it mattered most. They forgot that law does not reward bursts of passion, but compounding obedience. And here lies the deeper secret. Repetition does not only program the mind, it summons the unseen. Call it providence, call it spirit, call it eternal order, whatever you name it, it responds to rhythm. Men who repeated law nightly have bent not only their own lives, but the very age they lived in. Edison repeated vision until the world was lit. Ford repeated belief until the horse was replaced. Rockefeller repeated order until oil bent into streams of gold. Carnegie repeated empire until steel built cities. Buffett repeated patience until wealth compounded beyond imagination. And nameless cowboys, repeating gratitude and steadiness under star-pinned skies, carved legacies of families who would survive where others perished. The unseen always answers the faithful, but it despises the fickle, the double-minded man who speaks law once and doubt 10 times, who whispers faith one night and fear the next. That man will reap confusion, and his children will inherit it. But the man who guards his final hour as holy, who speaks with unwavering conviction, who repeats until repetition becomes identity, who refuses to break rhythm even when storms howl, that man cannot be denied. For as surely as dawn follows night, as surely as seed brings harvest, as surely as thought shapes being, his barns will fill, his peace will deepen, his influence will echo across generations. This is the weight of the nightly covenant. It is not just for you, it is for every soul tied to your name, for every child yet unborn who will walk in the rhythm you establish or stumble in the weeds you sow. So tonight, when silence falls and darkness closes, do not treat the moment lightly. Speak the sentence with reverence, plant it with conviction, seal it with persistence, and rise tomorrow knowing that law has already begun its work, unseen, unstoppable, inevitable. This is the trail, this is the covenant, this is the way the world bends. Picture the man who keeps this covenant not for days, not for weeks, not even for a handful of seasons, but for decades, until the rhythm is so deep that even if he tried, he could not break it, because it has ceased to be discipline and has become nature. In his youth, he may have whispered the sentence with trembling lips, unsure if it would hold, battling doubts that clawed at his ribs, enduring storms that made him wonder if he was foolish to persist. But he persisted anyway, night after night, word after word, until the whisper hardened into steel, until the sentence became marrow, until law engraved itself into his very breath. And now look at him years later, barns overflowing, peace unshakable, influence radiating like heat from a fire that never dies. You see it in the way he wakes. There is no dread, no confusion, no hesitation. His mornings are not reactive but commanding, because the night has already prepared the day. You see it in his speech. He does not waste words on complaint or fear. His tongue has been trained by decades of repetition, and so every sentence he utters carries the weight of law. You see it in his decisions. He does not flinch at storms. He does not chase distractions. He does not scatter his focus. His identity is too anchored, his subconscious too loyal, his rhythm too practiced. The world bends quietly before him, not because he shouts, but because his very being commands it. This is the fruit of decades of nightly law. His family feels it too. His wife rests in confidence, no longer burdened by the old tensions of uncertainty. His children grow up breathing faith as naturally as air, for they watched him repeat it nightly. They saw the barns fill. They witnessed the storms pass without shaking him. His grandchildren inherit the pattern even if they never knew the origin, for identity compounds across generations just as wealth compounds across decades. The community senses it as well. They gather near him in storms. They seek his counsel when chaos reigns. They draw peace from his steadiness as though it were a well that never runs dry. And though he may never chase applause, the weight of his life speaks louder than 1,000 speeches. This is what it means when a man becomes law in motion. He no longer needs to argue for his beliefs, his barns argue for him. He no longer needs to prove his discipline, his legacy proves it. He no longer needs to shout about his peace, his very presence proves it. He has become what he repeated, and nothing in heaven or earth can deny it. Solomon became such a man in wisdom, so much so that nations bent toward his counsel. Buffett became such a man in patience, so much so that markets tilt in deference to his decisions. The cowboy becomes such a man on the range, his word is binding his contract, his calm is steadying his stone. And so may you, if you hold the covenant long enough that repetition becomes inheritance. But beware, the same law multiplies drift just as surely. The man who repeats fear nightly becomes fear itself. The man who repeats hesitation nightly becomes hesitation itself. The man who repeats doubt nightly becomes doubt itself. And just as barns can swell with plenty, so too can they rot with lack, and legacies bequeath chains instead of crowns. That is why this covenant is no game. It is a yoke you will wear until your fire burns out, and it will leave fruit long after. Choose wisely, and you will look back after decades with no regret, knowing you bent the world by bending yourself. Choose poorly, and you will look back with barns empty, legacy squandered, chains handed down to your children. The choice is daily, but the harvest is eternal. Now let us ride to the far horizon, where even death itself cannot erase the rhythm of a sovereign life. For when a man has repeated law long enough, when he has lived it so faithfully that it has seeped beyond his marrow into the very soil of history, then his passing does not end his influence, it multiplies it. Think of it plain. A man who dies with barns full but a soul empty leaves behind only wood and stone that rot in the hands of heirs who squander it. But a man who dies with barns full, an identity carved by law, leaves behind more than wealth. He leaves behind rhythm, and rhythm cannot be stolen, cannot be buried, cannot be erased. Solomon's wisdom still echoes across thousands of years, not because his gold survived, but because his thought did. Buffett's name will endure far beyond his fortune, for his discipline has already been woven into the architecture of global wealth. The cowboy legend outlives him too, not because his herd is remembered, but because his grit and steadiness become stories told at fires generations after his saddle is empty. That is the final fruit of nightly repetition, immortality of influence. The sentence whispered in silence for decades becomes a current that outlives the man, a river flowing into generations unborn. You may think your nightly whisper is small, but in time it becomes the marrow of nations. Yet here lies the sharper warning. If you do not repeat law, you still repeat something, and repetition of fear, of doubt, of drift, of complaint will outlive you just as surely. Children inherit the weeds as much as they inherit the orchards. Communities inherit the weakness as much as they inherit the strength. Nations bend to the coward as much as to the sovereign. This is why eternity itself seems to lean in at that final hour before sleep. It is as though heaven and hell wait on your lips, eager to multiply whatever seed you sow. So choose well, choose law, choose sovereignty. Whisper the sentence until your very bones believe it. I am wealth, I am peace, I am power, for as I think, so I become. Whisper it until your barns are proof, until your peace is unshakable, until your children walk in the rhythm without even knowing where it began. Whisper it until the day you draw your last breath, and even then, the rhythm will carry forward, echoing in the lives you touched, multiplying in the subconscious of those who heard you, bending futures you will never see. Death is not an end for the man who lived by law, it is a door, and what he sowed in thought, in speech, in repetition, will walk on without him, louder than tombstones, stronger than monuments, truer than memory. That is the crown of a sovereign life. To bend the world while you live, and to bend it still after you are gone. And the secret of it all rests not in fortune, not in talent, not in brilliance, but in a nightly whisper, spoken faithfully in silence, guarded as covenant, obeyed as law.